This is actually pretty bad. This past month, while I've been covering some of the cyber events going on over Ukraine, I've been very careful to clarify whenever something is bad and something is fairly innocuous. For instance, whenever we see something like denial of service attack or a website defacement, I've been very careful to say that objectively from a technical standpoint, it doesn't indicate a breach or that data was leaked. It doesn't indicate that malware was implanted or detonated. Really, it's just a low-level, high-visibility attack that looks bad, but objectively isn't that bad. One example of that would be today whenever it was announced that Ukraine was undergoing a fairly large denial of service attack to a number of government and private institutions. However, last month we got one example with Whispergate where we saw really what is objectively a pretty bad cyber attack where the malware overwrote the boot directory on infected systems and caused them to reboot, which basically bricked the entire computer system. That malware was known to impact not only the Ukrainian government, but a number of private institutions, both in the tech and the finance sector. And yes, I say that malware overwrote the boot directory, not encrypt, meaning that there is no way to recover the data and there's no way to recover the boot directory. The only real way to recover your system is to re-image it. And let's talk about why that isn't exactly the most feasible solution, and that is because Ukraine is looking at an impending Russian invasion. All the indicators have shown that Russia is prepared to launch an invasion very, very soon. And if you're watching this video, it could be a possibility that it's already kicked off. If it hasn't, well, thank God. However, one of those indicators would be a cyber attack, and not just any cyber attack. Again, we've talked previously with the case of like a denial of service attack and the website defacement from last month. Those are low-level, high-visibility attacks, but they don't necessarily indicate that action is going to happen. What would be bad if we started seeing cyber attacks on critical infrastructure and other institutions that actually inflicted some sort of damage, whether that's damage to the computer system itself or to the actual physical infrastructure. And that's where this malware gets to be a little bit concerning because it really checks those boxes. If that malware is detonated, not only is the boot directory overwritten and that operating system completely lost, but that malware also causes a reboot of that system. So whether you like it or not, if that malware is running, it'll probably cause that system to restart and cause you to lose that system. The concern is that this would take place immediately before or in conjunction with some sort of kinetic activity by the Russian military. And the objective, of course, would be to disrupt, degrade, or completely stop the dissemination of information or any kind of response by the Ukrainian government or military to any kind of Russian military action. It's fairly low cost and low effort to be able to launch some sort of a cyber attack like with a denial of service attack or a website defacement. It's also fairly low cost to be able to stop those sorts of cyber attacks, and that's why we see denial of service attacks really last only a few hours at most, and then they're stopped. By contrast, it's difficult to be able to pre-position malware on computer systems and to be able to detonate it before getting caught. It's also pretty difficult for defenders to be able to catch that malware without indicators that malware is actively running, or vigilance and scanning of those computer systems and networks to find indicators that malware exists. Which in this case, whenever the malware is fairly novel, there aren't really many examples of this malware in other environments. Those indicators that you would typically use to scan your environment for to find this malware don't really exist. So it's kind of hard to be able to get the tooling to find that malware anywhere that it is. All until it's too late, the malware is running and you know for sure because your computer is dead. Also consider time as a factor, especially whenever the determining factor is an invasion. Normally in an attack, you'd have just about all the time in the world to be able to re-image a machine and get it redeployed. And the most that you're going to lose is lost revenue or a damaged reputation. In this case, however, the pacing factor is literally missiles and airstrikes and a potential ground push. So if you were a network admin or a cybersecurity engineer and you're kind of having to make a decision between re-imaging a machine or going to safety so that way you don't get caught in this invasion, you probably should take the option to flee to safety. And that's probably the decision that most people would take. So that means that a lot of the computer systems that do get wiped, if an invasion has already kicked off, those systems aren't coming back online. They're pretty much done. And again, that's not to say that an invasion is about to happen. In fact, hopefully it doesn't. But if it is, this is one indicator that it's about to happen. Now, some other interesting information has been published by ESET and Symantec, who have been diving into this malware. Some data indicates that this malware may have been pre-positioned on these systems as far back as December, which is a month in advance of when we first were exposed to this malware back in January. So it shows that the attackers may have had access to these systems much longer in advance, especially whenever you factor in other data that was published with this research research indicating that attackers would have to have control over the Active Directory server, which not only is a huge issue because it allows attackers to permeate the malware throughout the network using the trusted connections, but it also shows that the attackers are present on the network and who knows what data could have been exfiltrated or other kinds of malware infiltrated into the environment prior to this moment. They also show that this malware uses stolen certificates and legitimate drivers to overwrite files, including the boot directory. This malware may also not only be limited to Ukraine, and that's really where this threat begins to increase if you're not in Ukraine. It's bad enough that this malware exists and that it's targeting a legitimate government. But one issue is whenever these cyber actions begin to impact other countries outside of Ukraine, especially NATO countries. This isn't just any malware, this is a malware that might be used in support of an invasion. It's probably some of the most destructive malware that we've seen on the internet in a long time. And so it's really going to take a lot of studying to be able to know more about this malware and to be able to catch it in the wild. And it is crucial that we do so as soon as possible. Overall, this is an extremely concerning situation, and I'm continuing to keep my eye on it and hopefully provide some reliable intelligence for you on the cyber events that's going on. But in the meantime, if you haven't caught up on previous events and familiarized yourself with things like information warfare, hybrid warfare, and things like that, check out this playlist because I've collected it all in there just for you to be able to catch up and familiarize yourself with these events. And be sure to share this with a friend to be able to raise awareness on what's going on, because no doubt we're going to be seeing more of this in the future, and it's important that we are aware of not only the history of this malware, but its more technical effects. So with that, I'll see you all next time. Bye.